So, all right, guys, let's start with today's lecture. I hope I have your attention. So, let's start with the lecture. So, hi, everybody. I'm Sandeep Gupta, and I'm here to teach you a subject called C programming, which in short is called CP. Now, till 2-3 years back, the same subject was called SPA, that is Structured Programming Approach. So whether we say CP or Structured Programming Approach, it is one and the same. Now, in this course, I'll be definitely teaching you C programming, but apart from C programming, I'll also be teaching you C++ programming at no extra cost. Okay, so attending the C++ programming is optional for you, but if you want, you can still attend this course. Also, I hope you know that C++ is the superset of C. So what happens is we'll have to first finish off with the C programming language, and only after that we can do C++. Okay. Now, let me tell you a little about myself. So as I told you, my name is Sandeep Gupta, and I have been teaching programming since 2004. So I have taught languages like C, C++, Java, Python, JavaScript, and many more. In first year, I teach students of all branches, and after that, I specialize in teaching programming and programming related subjects to comms and IT people. I have my own classes called Study Circle in Mulund and Vashi, and in Borivali, I'm a part of Agarwal Education Center along with Vinayak sir and Sanjay sir. In my entire career of 15-16 years, I have taught at least 30,000 students. So that may seem like an exaggeration to you, but that is the fact. Anyway, enough about me. Now let's continue with the subject. So now the first question over here is what CP contains. So by now you already know that CP contains a programming language called C. Okay, now first of all, if you want to understand the meaning of programming language, you should know the meaning of the word programming. So let me define the word programming for you. So programming is the art of writing programs, or I will say programming is the simple activity of writing programs. So whenever you are writing programs, it is called programming. So that brings us to our next question, and the next question is that what is a program? Okay. Now here the problem starts. You are about to study programming over here. You are about to do C programming, and in this course you are about to write lots and lots and lots of programs. But I'm sure many of you don't even know the meaning of the word program. So guys, I have a question for you all. Okay, so let me first ask you the question. The question is, I want to know how many of you know the definition of program. Now over here, I will not ask you the definition. I repeat, I promise I will not ask you the definition, but I want to know that how many of you know the definition, the meaning of the word program. So those who know the meaning of the word program, please raise your hands. Come on, do that. I hope you know how to raise your hands on Zoom. And once again, I promise I will not ask you the definition of the word program. Okay. I just want to know that how many of you know the meaning of the word program. So come on, let this course be interactive. Although we are not in a physical classroom, but still let's try to make it as interactive as possible. So at least raise your hands on Zoom, and I'll not ask you the definition. I just want to know that how many of you know the meaning of the word program. So how many of you? I'm waiting. All right, so it seems none of you know the meaning of the word program, and here the problem starts. You are about to do a subject called C programming, in which you are going to write so many programs, but you don't even know the meaning of the word program. So guys, the first thing we will do is, in your notebook, we will write the definition of the program, and we'll try to understand what the program is. So after 10 minutes, everybody, I repeat, everybody should know the meaning of the word program. So I hope you have a notebook with you. So always keep your notebook and a pen with you. We are going to write many things. I repeat, many things in the notebook. So now I will dictate the definition of the program, and I want everybody to write this definition. So come on, be ready with your notebook. Come on, everybody should have the notebook. So I'll start dictating. Okay, now write the answer point wise. Point number 1, come on, right? A program is a sequence of instructions. A program is a sequence of instructions which reads data, comma, processes this data, and gives the desired output. I repeat point number 1. A program is a sequence of instructions which reads data, comma, processes this data, and gives the desired output. All right, now everybody will write point number 2 of the definition. We are still writing the definition of the program. In other words, a program is a sequence of instructions to the computer to perform a particular task. In other words, a program is a sequence of instructions to the computer to perform a particular task. Finally, point number 3. A program is always written in programming language. A program is always written in programming language. All right, so I hope you wrote these 3 points. Now let's understand this definition. Let's analyze this definition point wise. Now I will read point number 1. And as I told you that although we are not in a physical classroom, but we will try to simulate things of a physical classroom as much as possible. So while I'm reading point number 1, I want you to also read point number 1 in your mind. Okay, so do that while I'm reading point number 1. So a program is a sequence of instructions which reads data, comma, processes this data, and gives the desired output. Okay, now let's try to understand the meaning of this statement with the help of an example. Now let's say I don't know how to add 2 numbers. Okay, listen to my question carefully, because I'm going to ask this question to any one of you. All right, throughout the entire lecture, I'll be asking questions to any one of you. Okay, all right. So let's say I don't know how to add 2 numbers. Okay, and I'm telling you that please give me the sum of 2 numbers. Okay, I'm telling you to please give me the sum of 2 numbers. All right. Now, if I don't know how to add 2 numbers, and if I'm telling you to please give me the sum of 2 numbers, what is the first question which you will ask me? Okay, I hope you understood the question. I don't know how to add 2 numbers. I'm asking you to give me the sum of 2 numbers. So what is the first question which you will ask me? By the way, before you answer the question, let me also tell you one thing, that if you want to become a successful programmer, then the first thing which you need to have is common sense. Okay, if you don't have common sense, you will never ever become a good programmer. Okay, so now I have a list of participants in front of me. So randomly I'll ask one of you this question. Just a minute. By the way, please don't use the chat box for any doubts or any answering. All right, use the chat box only when there is a problem, like there is no voice and so on. Okay, all right. So now I have a list of participants in front of me. So there is a participant called Bhavin. Okay, Bhavin Motwani, can you hear me? And if you can hear me, can you please tell me, Bhavin? If I ask you to add 2 numbers for me, okay, then what is the first question which you will ask me? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, Bhavin, can you tell me the answer? Okay, it's It's okay. So let's ask this question to someone else. Bhavin, please unmute yourself. Okay, so I'll ask this question to Nidhi Sawant. Okay, so Nidhi Sawant, unmute yourself and tell me, if I ask you, give me the sum of two numbers, what is the first question which you will ask me?
Sir, what are the numbers to add?
Very good, very good. So Nidhi, please unmute your, sorry, please mute yourself, sorry. Okay. So guys, see, as I told you, if you want to become a good programmer, the first thing which you need to have is common sense. Okay. So if I am asking you to give me the sum of two numbers, you will obviously ask me which two numbers. So let's say I give you two numbers. Let's say I give you two numbers, and these two numbers are, just a minute. Let's say these two numbers are 5 and 6. 5 and 6. Okay. Now I gave you two numbers 5 and 6. Now come on, answer the next question in your mind. Okay, answer the next question in your mind. Now if you get the two numbers 5 and 6, what is the next thing which you are going to do on these two numbers? So the next thing which you will do on these two numbers is, in your mind, I repeat, in your mind, you will add the two numbers 5 and 6, and your mind now knows that the result is 11. Okay. Now, once you know that the result is 11, will you keep quiet or will you speak out the result? Obviously, you will speak out the result. You will tell the person that, look, the sum of 5 and 6 is 11. Okay. So now over here, if you look at the step 1, what you are doing is you are reading data. You are reading data from somebody. If you look at the step 2, what you are doing is you are processing this data in your mind. And if you look at step 3, what you are doing is you are telling the person the result of your processing. In other words, you are giving some kind of output to that person. So finally, what is a program? So a program is basically a sequence of instructions. And these instructions, what work they will do is they will read some data, they will process some data, and they will give you the desired output. Okay. So as you see over here, there are instructions where the first instruction is reading data, second is processing data, and third is giving you the output. So this is point number 1 of the definition which you wrote. Okay. So point number 1 says a program is a sequence of instruction which reads data, processes data, and gives the desired output. So I hope you understood point number 1. Now let's read point number 2. Okay. And as I told you, while I am reading, you also should read it in your mind. So point number 2 says, in other words, a program is a sequence of instructions to the computer to perform a particular task. Now, this is quite interesting. Listen to me carefully. Okay, things are interesting if you're attentive. Now, what happens is whenever we use this word instruction, okay, I repeat, whenever we use this word instruction, please understand one thing. Every instruction is meant for somebody. Every instruction is meant for somebody. For example, while you are traveling on the road, okay, you see an instruction, wear seat belt while driving. I repeat, you see the instruction, wear seat belt while driving. Now, again, I'm going to ask one of you this question, okay? So the question is that this instruction, wear seat belt while driving, is meant for whom, okay? So I have Tejas Patil with me, okay? So Tejas Patil, please unmute yourself and can you give me the answer? This instruction is meant for whom? Wear seat belt while driving?
For the driver of the car.
Is it for a driver of a four-wheeler or for a rider of two-wheeler?
Four-wheeler.
Yes, okay. So mute yourself. All right. So over here, what you should understand is that this instruction that wear seat belt while driving is for a four-wheeler driver, not for a rider of two-wheeler. For a two-wheeler rider, we would say the instruction would be that wear helmet while driving. So the point I'm trying to make is that every instruction is meant for somebody. So now, once again, let's read point number 2 very carefully. Okay, it seems unimportant, but point number 2 is very important. It says that a program is a sequence of instructions to the computer for performing a particular task. So over here, pay attention to the words to the computer. So the whole point I'm trying to make is that whenever you write a program, the instructions in the program are meant for the computer. So when we say that read data, we are actually telling the computer that look computer, you read two numbers. Look computer, you add two numbers. Look computer, you give the result of this addition that way. Okay. So point number 2 is clear now that it is a sequence of instructions to the computer. Finally, point number 3, which is quite simple, it says a program is always written in a programming language. Now, very simple what it means. See, languages like English, Hindi, Marathi, Gujarati, all these are natural languages, and these languages are used by human beings to communicate with each other. So when human beings communicate with each other, they communicate with each other using natural languages. Sorry. Now, if you want to communicate with a computer, if you want to communicate with a computer, then you cannot use natural languages. You have to use a special category of languages called programming languages. So C language, C++ language, Java, Python, JavaScript, all of them are basically, just a minute, all of them are basically programming languages, and using these programming languages we communicate with the computer. So in this particular course we will communicate with the computer using the C programming language. Finally, in very simple words, if you ask me what is a program, in very simple words I will say that a program is basically written to make the computer do some work for you. Yeah, that's right. So whenever you want the computer to do some work for you, you write a program. And that is what we are going to do in this semester. And we are going to write programs in C language. All right. Now, I'm sorry. Now let's move ahead. Now, once you understand what we are going to study, now let's understand the problems which you are going to face in this subject. Now, I want you guys to be very, very, very attentive in the next 10-15 minutes, because I'm going to tell you the problems which you are going to face in this particular subject. If you understand the problems properly, then you will be better equipped to solve those problems, to face those problems. Okay, so please be attentive. All right. The first problem with this subject, with C programming, is that it involves programming. So some of you may say, so what? So what? So the thing what I'm trying to tell you is that C programming is a totally new subject for you. And if something is new, it is bound to create problems. Okay. Whether you buy a new shoes, or you have a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend, anything which is new is bound to create problems for you. All right. Now let's understand this better. Let's take example of mechanics, which is there in semester 1 of degree engineering. Now, some of you in this course may not be from engineering background, so it's okay, but 99% of the students are from engineering. So I'll take examples related to engineering. Okay. So let's take example of the subject mechanics, which you have in semester 1 of engineering. Okay. Now, I'll ask a question to one of you, and I have Anjali Kakekar in front of me. All right. So, Anjali, can you please unmute yourself? Anjali?
Yes, sir.
So tell me one thing, Anjali, this mechanics which you are studying in semester 1, okay, the concepts which you study in mechanics, those concepts you have already studied in which subject in 12th standard, 11th and 12th standard? Whatever you are studying in mechanics, okay, the basic concept, the basics, the methods, okay, which you are using in mechanics, let's say force, acceleration, all those basic concepts you have studied in which subject in 11th and 12th standard? Can you tell me?
Physics.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so please mute yourself. All right. So as Anjali told us that whatever you're studying in mechanics, actually you have studied the basics as physics in 11th, 12th. So mechanics in reality is not a new subject. It's just that you're studying some new topics of physics in semester 1, and those new topics are called mechanics. The same goes for BEE also. Similarly, whatever you're studying in mathematics, its basic concepts you have already studied in your 11th or 12th standard. But this is not the case. But this is not the case with CP, with programming. For many of you, programming is a totally new subject, and anything which is new is automatically complicated. In fact, 10 minutes back, many of you did not even know the meaning of the word program. Okay, so please understand one thing: it is a new subject for you, and it is bound to create problems for you. All right. Now let's understand the second problem. And again, I'm telling you to please be attentive and understand the problems. Things are very interesting if you're listening to me carefully. Another problem with this subject is, with C programming, is that in C programming, every problem is a new problem for which you will have to think right from scratch. Every problem is a new problem for which you'll have to think right from scratch. Okay. Now, again, in order to understand this, let's take one example. Okay, let's take one example. I'll ask you a question, and once again, I will expect an answer from someone from you. So the question is this: understand the question. Now, just a few days back, you have given your semester 1 exams. Okay. Now, imagine that time when you were giving your BEE question paper. Okay. So let's say you are giving the BEE question paper of semester 1, just I think 10 days back. Okay. Or 1 week back, whatever it is. Okay. Now in your BEE question paper, the moment you saw a problem, okay, what is the first thing which came to your mind? I repeat my question. Imagine the time you're solving your BEE question paper of semester 1, and let's say you have read a problem, and now you're about to solve that problem. But just when you're about to solve the problem, right in the beginning, what is the first thing which comes in your mind when you want to solve the problem? Okay, so again, I'll ask this question to somebody. All right, so this time, let's say it's Shashank. Okay, so Shashank Kota, can you please unmute and give me the answer? Shashank Kota.
Yes, sir.
What is the first thing which came to your mind when you were about to solve the problem? Tell me.
The solution.
Pardon?
The solution.
Can you be a bit louder, please?
The solution.
Sorry, I'm not able to understand. So I'll ask this question to someone else. I have Richa Rokadia in front of me. Richa, can you unmute and give me the answer?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
The method to solve the problem.
Very good. Now, this is the word I was looking for. Please mute yourself. So, as Richa told us, the first thing which comes to your mind is the method which is required to solve the problem. Now, what happens is that when you are doing programming, in programming, every problem will be a new problem, and for that problem, and in programming, every problem is a new problem for which there are no methods. Yes, you read it right. In programming, okay, no matter which programming you are doing, there are no fixed methods to solve a problem. So for every problem, you will have to think right from scratch, right from beginning. So you may have a problem to find factorial of a number. By the way, when I say problem, I mean program. So you may have a program to find the factorial of a number. You may have a program to check whether a given number is a prime number or not. The techniques which are used, the concepts which are used in factorial program will not be same as prime number program. The concepts which are used in prime number programs will not be same as some other program. Sorry. So what will happen is, for every problem, you'll have to think right from scratch. In fact, right now, I'll tell you something very interesting. And whatever I'm telling you, okay, whatever I'm telling you, remember this thing in your mind, because the same thing will come to your mind later on. So today it is 7th May and the time is 6:29 p.m. 6:29 p.m. and 7th May, 6:29 p.m. I am telling you one thing. Now, what one thing? Listen. After a month, what will happen is you will be able to understand all the programs which I am teaching you, but you will not be able to write a program on your own. Okay, and that is because what happens is programming requires something called logic development. Okay, now let's understand what is the meaning of this. So first of all, in context of programming, logic means the art of writing programs. Logic means art of writing programs, and this logic cannot be developed. I'm sorry, this logic cannot be learned. It has to be developed. Now, learning can be done in a specific period of time, but for developing, you need lots and lots of time. Now, again, to explain my point to you, I'll ask you a question, quite interesting. Again, listen to the question, and the question will be answered by one of you. So listen to this carefully. Now, in your semester one, you had physics. Okay. Now, let's say, listen to my question carefully. Okay. Let's say you decide that you will not study physics in entire semester one. You will not study physics in entire semester one. Okay. You will study physics only in the last month, of your semester one. So let's say you decide that in the last 1 month, I will eat physics, sleep physics, drink physics. I will do physics. That's it. Nothing else. No mechanics, no BW, nothing. Now, my question to you is, if you study physics that way in the last 1 month, if you study physics this way in the last 1 month, will you be able to do physics properly for your semester one exams? I mean, will you do well in your semester one exams? So that is my question to you. I repeat the question again. Only in the last 1 month, you decide to do physics, and you will do only physics in that 1 month. So is it possible to complete physics in that last 1 month? Okay, so your answer should be either yes or no. Yes, we can complete physics. No, it is not possible to do physics that way. Okay, so I'll ask this question to Saloni Shah. Okay, so Saloni, please unmute yourself and tell me, is it possible?
No, sir. It depends on the person also, but
You have 1 month. Is it possible? And you are supposed to do only physics, nothing else.
in 1 month, if we do, then we can do. But it's like another subject will be ignored. So it's not
Let's
possible.
hypothetical. Let's say you have completed everything else. Now only physics is there. What do you think?
Then it is possible.
Okay. I will not answer the question. Let me ask one more person, someone else. So I have Rahul. I have 1 minute. Okay. So I have Rahul Kapadia. Okay. So Rahul, you answer the question. Is it possible? Yes or no?
No, sir, it's not possible.
Okay. Let me ask one more person, Sheldon. Okay. Is it possible, Sheldon?
No, sir.
No. 1 month only physics. Nothing else.
With respect to theory, it will be possible, but numerical is not possible.
Okay, so now everybody please mute yourself. My answer to this question would be a clear yes. Okay, so if I don't have anything else to do, okay, no mechanics, no BWE, nothing, and if I'm told to do only physics in this 1 month, I think I can definitely complete physics ekdam aaram se, very easily. So those who are saying no, okay, you have a bigger problem. Anyway, let's come back to the point what I'm trying to make. Okay, now listen to me carefully. The point I was trying to make is a subject like physics, maths, BWE, mechanics, all these subjects can be learned. I repeat, learned. But programming, I mean the logic, is something which you need to develop. So what happens is, you can complete other things in a specific period of time. You can say, "ठीक है, मैं physics last के 1 महीने में करूँगा," and it is still possible, I think, to do that. और जिन्होंने मुझे ना बोला, the people who told me no, it is not possible. So I'm really worried about you guys. How will you do programming? Anyway, let's get back to the facts. So the point I'm trying to make is, see, what happens is, if you decide something like this for programming, if you decide that I will do C programming only in my last 1 month, so then you will be like this guy. Okay, you will be like this guy. You will just keep breaking your head over the computer and nothing will happen. Nothing. Okay. And effectively, you will give up on programming. So if you want to be good in programming, if you want to pass C programming properly with flying colors, you have to start it right now, What will happen is, in the beginning, you will be able to understand my programs, okay, but you will not be able to write programs on your own. Then slowly, with practice, your logic will be developed, and maybe in another 2 months or 2.5 months, you will be able to write your programs in the answer paper of your semester 2. Okay, but for that, you need to start right now. Okay, sorry. And if you don't start right now, then obviously your pass percentage could get affected. Now, let me also talk a little about pass percentage of CP. The problem is that you guys don't go to college, but if you know anyone of higher semester, okay, second year, third year, fourth year, whatever, please ask that person that what is the pass percentage of CP in semester 2, or ask the question in another way. Ask the question to any of your seniors that in semester 2, maximum number of KTs are for which subject, and 100% of the students, I'm not saying 99, 100% of the students will give you the answer CP, or they may say SPA, because in higher, because till 2 years back, the name of the subject was SPA. So what happens is, the pass percentage of CP is never more than 30%. That means every year, maximum 30% students pass CP. In fact, in 2010, the pass percentage was 17%. In 2016, the pass percentage was 22%. Why? Because in these two papers, there was no theory question, there were no exercise questions, there were only programs. Okay, so pass percentage of CP is very, very, very low, and for that, okay, and that's what I'm telling you, you need to work on CP right from the beginning. Okay, anyway, now what CP is not. So let me clarify one misconception over here. Now, CP is not installing software on the computer. CP is not typing on the computer. No. See, there are some students who are very good with computers. Now, when I say very good with computers, I don't mean programming. I mean they are very good in, kind of installing softwares on the computer. So you ask that student anything. You ask a student, okay, which software do I need for removing password from a PDF file? He will have an answer. Which software do I need to do this, to do that, to do XYZ, whatever? And that student will have an answer. Now, this is something, we say that you are very good in installing softwares on computers. So understand one thing, that this is not CP. CP, that means C programming, or I will use the word programming, is a totally different ball game. So if you are very good with computers in general, don't think you will be very good with programming also. Programming is a totally different thing. The next question, in which many of you will be interested and many of you will be relieved to listen to my answer. Okay. The question is, who gets a KT in CP or who does not get a KT in CP? Okay. Many of you will be relieved when I answer this question. If you are an average student who does not know programming, but if you're attending my lectures regularly, or for that matter, anybody's lectures, okay? So if you are an average student who does not know programming, but if you're taking programming seriously, if you're attending lectures seriously for programming, then you will not get a KT in CP. You may even pass CP with flying colors. I repeat, flying colors. So then who gets a KT? So first of all, that there are two types of students who get KT in CP. The first student is that student who does not know programming and who does not even give importance to programming. So there will be a student XYZ. He has never done programming in his life. He does not want to go to any coaching classes. He does not want to even study CP on his own. So obviously he will get a KT. Now there is one more student who may get KT in CP, and this is the student who has done programming in 11th and 12th. Now what happens is, some of you must have taken computer science or IT in your 11th and 12th. Now what happens is that in 11th, 12th, most of you do programming half-heartedly. Okay, some of you join a 10-day course in order to just clear your paper. And if you ask yourself that whether you know programming, the answer would be actually no. Now, these students who have done half-hearted programming in 11th and 12th, they also end up getting a KT because of overconfidence. So if you are one of them, okay, I'm warning you that take CP seriously now, okay, especially if you have taken Comms and IT, okay. Now, the next thing to be understood over here is why CP is so important. So once again, I want you all to please be attentive, to please understand some statistics over here, some interesting facts which you don't know as of now. Sorry. Now, why CP is so important? Now, what happens is, no matter you are from which stream, you may be from Comms, IT, EXTC, electronics, biomedical, electrical, instrumentation, or whatever. What happens is that 90% of engineering graduates, I repeat, 90% of the engineering graduates, when they work after 4 years, or when they finally choose their field after 4 years, 90% of the engineering graduates end up in a software company. So this is especially true about EXTC, electronics, electrical, biomedical, instrumentation, and of course Comms and IT. Okay. So what happens is 90% of the students from these fields of engineering, they eventually end up in the software company. Now, when you work in the software company, obviously the first thing which you need to know very well is programming. So what will happen is, listen to me carefully, please be attentive. What will happen is, when you are in your last year of engineering, many software companies will come for placements. I hope we don't have coronavirus by then. Okay. So many software companies will come to your colleges. Okay. And these software companies will even allow non-comp IT students in their company. I repeat, they will even allow non-comp IT students for recruitment. But obviously, they will take some kind of technical test. So most of the software companies, I will not say most, I will say all software companies, they will take a test either on C language or Java, C or Java. Okay, not even C++. So what will happen is, if you are not good in programming, okay, if you're not good in C, if you're not good in Java, then although the company is allowing you, still you will fail those tests. Okay. So this is one reason why you should be very good in programming. Now, I'm sure there must be many students who must be thinking in their minds that I don't want to work in the software industry. I am from mechanical. I am from automobile. Some of you must be thinking, "Arey, my father has a sarika shop. I will obviously run that shop. Engineering though is just a time pass for me." So please understand one thing. You at least need to pass semester 2. You don't need KT in semester 2. Okay. There are many software companies. In fact, there are many companies, leave software. There are many automobile companies also. When they come for placements, what they say is that we want students with 0 KTs in engineering. Okay. So the thing is that even if you don't want to work in software industry, still passing the subject is important, and that's why you should take CP very seriously. Now, I'll show you something very interesting. Okay, you may not believe me, so I'll show you something very interesting so that you give CP its due importance. Now, this is an article from Times of India. Okay, so I want one of you to read the heading over here. Okay, so Samuel, can you unmute yourself and can you read the heading over here, this headline over here? Can you read it, please?
It's poor engineering makes 47% grads unemployable, say studies.
Okay, all right. So now, if you see this headline very carefully, what it says is, it says poor engineering makes 47% grads unemployable. See, this headline is not telling you that 47% students are not finding jobs. No, it does not tell you that. It tells you that 47%, okay, that means half of the engineering students are unemployable. That means they do not have skills required for a job. Now, over here, there is some important point given over here, and I want one of you to read it loudly. So, Siddh Shah. Okay, can you read this thing? Siddh Shah. Can you
Yes,
read?
sir. 50 to 60% of computer science information technology engineers don't understand
Subtleties
subtleties of programming concepts. More than
more than
80% are unable to apply them to real world situations.
okay. So now what it is telling you is that at least 50 to 60% of computer science IT students don't understand programming concepts. And 80% are not able to apply these concepts to real world situations. Then overall, it also says that only 14.97% of the engineers, listen carefully, only 14.97% of the engineers are able to do application of programming constructs. So see, this article I have not printed. It is not my article. Okay, it is an article by Times of India. In fact, you can also do one thing. After the lecture is over, you can just go to Google and you can just type something like this, that engineers don't know programming. Okay, you can type something like this, and what will happen is you will see lots and lots of articles in prominent newspapers talking about the same thing. Okay, so guys, I'm sure that you don't want to be in one of these. Okay, see, please understand one thing. Listen to my next statement very, 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 very carefully. Okay. Uh, right from our childhood, please listen to me carefully. Right from our childhood, okay, we have been trained in such a manner that we have been told that only maths and science are important. Okay. And that is why what happens is that subconsciously, we ignore programming. We don't give programming its due importance. Okay. But of late, people and especially Indians have started realizing the importance of programming. Okay. In fact, this is because of this reason. I hope you must be knowing that a new education policy is coming into place. And in that new education policy, programming is a compulsory subject right from sixth standard, Okay. So what is going to happen is after 4 5 years or 6 years, whatever, okay, people who will come out in the job market, they may have more programming knowledge than you have. Why? Because they will be learning programming, they'll be studying programming right from school. So guys, this is your chance to do programming properly. Okay. So please give programming its due importance. Okay. Please understand that. All right. All right. Now, having said that, let me quickly tell you a few more things. Now, let's talk about the paper pattern. Okay. Now, in your paper, there will be 3 types of questions. Okay. You will have theory questions, you will have exercise questions, and you will have programs or algorithms. Programs and algorithms are similar. What is an algorithm? I'll teach you maybe in the next lecture. Now, what will happen is, listen to me carefully. Now, in these 3 types of questions, you will have theory for maximum, let's say 10%. Okay. So theory will come for maximum 10%. Okay. You will have exercises for maximum 5%. And you will have programs or algorithms for 85%. Now, what happens is that if you want to pass your CP paper, you cannot pass your CP paper without knowing the programs, without knowing the algorithms. You have to write the programs or algorithms correctly so that you can pass your CP exam. And that is why you have to take programming very seriously. Now, I'll give you 2 minutes. Quickly copy this into your notebook. Also copy this 10%, 5%, and 85%. Come on, do that. All right, now let's move ahead. Now, finally, some suggestions from my side. If you take these suggestions very seriously, then trust me, you'll pass CP with flying colors. The first suggestion is that be regular. Okay. Now, as it is, you are at home, you're not going anywhere else, you hardly have any other commitments. So you really don't have a reason to be absent for your lectures. So please be regular for your lectures. Just in case you are absent for any lecture, let's say you're not well or something, then you can always watch the recordings of the lecture. Okay. So if you miss the lecture, immediately on the same day, I repeat, immediately on the same day, you should ask me for the recordings. Okay. Although you can watch the recordings of the lectures, but still make it a habit of attending live lectures. Okay. So that will be more beneficial for you. Another thing is that when you're sitting for the lecture, when you come for the lecture, please come on time, please join on time. Okay. Now, if the lecture starts at 6 p.m., okay, don't be late, because what will happen is if you're late, you may miss some starting important concepts. Okay, you may miss what I have taught in the first 10 minutes. And if you miss the beginning of something, all right, then it will be very difficult for you to understand that particular lecture. So please come on time, please join the meetings on time. One very important advice, suggestion is that always keep 4 pens of you of 4 colors, that is blue, black, red, and green. Now, very often what I will do is I will also use colors. I will also use colors over here. And whenever I am using colors in my program, okay, you should also do the same thing. The whole idea over here is to use colors intelligently. And trust me, guys, if you use colors in your notebook, then at the end of the semester, understanding your own notebook will become very, 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 very simple. Okay. Now, let me give you one example. Now, let's say I have written 4 statements. Statement number 1 in red color, statement number 3 in red color. All right. And let's say I write statement number 2 in blue color and statement number 4 in blue color. All right. Now, if I write 4 statements, 2 in red color, 2 in blue color, what does that mean? Okay, what could be one meaning of it? All right. So let me ask this question to someone. Okay, so I have a student called Kunj Shah in front of me. So Kunj, according to you, what does this mean? I mean, what could be one meaning over here?
Yes, sir. Can you repeat? I didn't.
My question is, let's say in my program there are 4 statements. Statement 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 3 are in red color. 2 and 4 are in blue color. So what am I trying to convey over here?
Like we are just explaining something important, or we can understand easily.
Okay, I'll ask this question to Megan, I guess, Megan Wagle. Okay, so Megan, what could this mean?
Sir, points 1 and 3 are important. That's why they are marked red compared to points 2nd and 4th.
Okay, I'll ask one more. Let's say Karthik. What do you think? What it means, Karthik? Okay, no answer from Karthik. So Om Patel, Om, what do you think it means? Om.
So 1 and 3 are very important. And 2 and 4 are also important, but 1 and 3 are important.
No, okay, let me reframe my question. Okay, listen, let's say the entire program is written in black color. Okay, let's say the entire program is written in black color. 1 and 3 are in red color. 2 and 4 are in blue color. What could that mean? Okay, I'll ask this question to Mehak. So Mehak, what could that mean? Okay, all right, let me answer the question. So basically what I was trying to tell you over here is that if I have 1 and 3 in red, 2 and 4 in blue, one meaning over here, obviously they are important, but one meaning over here could be that 1 and 3 are related to each other in some way, and 2 and 4 are related to each other in some way. So guys, what will happen is if you use colors in this way in your notebook, then towards the end of the semester, okay, just one day before your exam, when you are reading from your notebook, trust me, okay, trust me, you will find things very, very, very simple just because of colors. So use colors intelligently. And this is my advice, especially to guys, especially to boys. I have seen in my classrooms, okay, I have been teaching since so many years, that although girls use colors, but I don't know, boys have some kind of ego problem using colors. So please, please use colors. And if you don't want to keep 4 pens with you, you can keep that 1 pen in which there are 4 refills. Okay, that is also okay. All right. Now, having said all this, now let me also tell you, let me also assure you that I will be teaching this subject, C programming, from scratch, assuming that you know nothing. So if you have done some kind of programming in your 11th and 12th, it's okay, well and good, okay. But still, I will assume that you know nothing, and we will study everything from scratch, from zero. Now, throughout your entire semester, you will be basically maintaining 2 books, theory and programs. So for theory, I will be giving you notes, okay. Normally in physical classrooms, we used to give printed notes, and while talking, I will say printed notes, but now I'll give it to you in the form of PDF. So today I have already given you PDF of 2 chapters. Okay. So this is the PDF. All right. You can see the table of contents over here. This is a table of contents. And these are some subjects, just some extra info, some subjects which I take. And then finally from here, the theory starts. Now, in your PDF, you will have only theory question answers, not programs. The programs will be written by you in the notebook. Okay, so I'll take the programs live online and you'll copy them in the notebook right in this class. Now, if you go through these printed notes, I will say printed notes because I'm used to saying printed notes. Okay, so if you look at these printed notes, you will realize that all the theory is given in question answer format. So it will be very easy for you. It will be very easy for you to remember the theory because it is in question answer format. Not only that, you will realize that all the answers are given point wise. Okay. So once again, things will become very simple for you. Now, not only that, all the answers are definitely given point wise. Not only that, but what will happen is sometimes what I will do is I will highlight some words in between. So for example, if you look at page number 17, over here, you see something highlighted, always represent single characters. Okay. So if you see these, this kind of highlighting in the printed notes, that means these words are important and you should not miss these words in your exam. So trust me guys, these words, this printed notes is very beautifully designed. You don't need to refer anything else for theory. In fact, let me tell you one thing and please listen to me carefully. Many students ask me that which textbooks they should buy for C programming. Okay, so my answer to you is none, no textbook at all. Okay, you don't need to buy anything else for C programming. Okay, all you need to do is refer these printed notes for theory and your own notebook for programs, and that will be all. That will be all. You don't need to refer anything else. So if you have already bought some textbook, I suggest donate it to somebody. Yeah, I actually mean it, donate it to somebody. In fact, there is one advice which I will give you very strongly, and that is that even if you have time, okay, do not refer anything else for C programming. Why? Because what will happen is that you will end up confusing yourself. One more advice is that if your college has already started, okay, I'm sure your college teacher may not be teaching you C programming nicely. Okay, 99.99% of the college teachers, I repeat, 99.99% of the college teachers cannot teach programming. Okay, so when you're attending your college lectures, okay, whatever you are learning in your college lectures, don't let it come in between our lectures. Okay, so when you sit for my lectures, try to do unlearning of what you have learned in your college. Because unfortunately, what happens is college teachers, many times they will teach you wrong things, incorrect things. Okay. So I assume you may have to sit for your college lectures compulsorily. Okay. But if the teacher is not good, okay, then don't take whatever that teacher is teaching you very seriously. All right. Anyway, now coming back over here. So as I told you, for theory, you have the printed notes. Programs you will write in your notebook. Okay. Now, one more thing is that we have a WhatsApp group called CP 2021. Okay. It's not CP Demo 2021. It is CP 2021. So if you have already taken admission, I repeat, if you have already taken admission, then join this group. Okay. You need to join this group if you have already taken admission. Finally, let's talk about autonomous colleges. So there are some autonomous colleges like DJ Sangvi and VJTI. Just a second. Just a second, guys. So there are some autonomous colleges like DJ Sangvi and VJTI, and they have C++ also. They have C++ also. Okay. So one thing which you need to understand is first we'll finish off with C. Okay, then we'll start with C++. Now, how and when I'll start with C++, that I will discuss with these students separately. And if you are interested in attending C++, if you are interested in attending C++, then you can also join them. Okay, but about C++, we'll discuss later on. So guys, that was enough for the beginning as an intro. Now, without wasting any time, we'll start with our course. We'll start with our syllabus. Okay. So take your notebook, and in your notebook, 1 minute, just a minute, guys. Just a minute. Okay. So guys, I want you all to take your notebook and okay. So guys, I want you all to take your notebook, and now we'll finally start with our course with chapter number 1. So give the heading chapter number 1, Fundamentals of Computer Programming, and under that write 1.1 computer. So come on, give the heading in black color, give the heading which is in blue color. Chapter number 1, Fundamentals of Computer Programming, and under that 1.1 computer. Come on. All right, so I assume you have given the headings. All right, now under 1.1 computer, write a question. So I'll dictate the question and you'll write the question right now in your notebook. So come on, write the question. Right. What is a computer? What is a computer? Explain its various units. Draw its block diagram. What is a computer? Explain its various units. Draw its block diagram. Okay, guys, listen. Now we are starting with chapter number 1, where we are going to study fundamentals of computer programming. Now, let me tell you one thing. See, as I told you, in your college, many of you may not be able to understand what your college teacher is teaching you. And that is because your college teacher is not teaching you the basics of computer programming. Okay. Now, in this chapter, there are a few things which are not there in the syllabus, and remaining things are obviously there in the syllabus. Okay. So these things which are not there in the syllabus, why I'm teaching you? Because these are the basics of computer programming. If you don't understand these basics, then later on you will not understand programming. Now, the heading 1.1 is computer, and the question is, what is a computer? Now, you are in first year engineering, so I'm sure you know what is a computer. But now whatever we are going to study, we are going to study that thing from programming point of view. I repeat, from programming point of view. Okay. So even if you know what is a computer, the blocks of the computer, okay, don't be overconfident. Okay. Don't tell yourself that I know these things. Everything and anything which we are going to study over here is important, is required for understanding programming later on. Okay. So now let's write that definition. Let's do one thing. Below your question, you wrote the question. Below that you write refer PN. When you write PN capital, refer PN capital, refer PN3. So guys, PN stands for printed notes, not page number, and 3 is obviously the page number. So why you wrote refer PN3? Because what happens is that many times I'll make you write refer PN this, refer PN that. So what this means is, it means that a detailed theory is there in your printed notes. We are just going to write some important points. Okay. So you wrote the question. We'll just write one important point over here. So just start writing the answer. I'll dictate. Come on, start. Right. A computer is an electronic or digital machine a computer is an electronic or digital machine which reads data, comma, processes it, and gives the desired output. We'll stop. In other words, the computer performs 3 basic tasks. Number 1, input. Number 2, processing. Number 3, output. All right. Now let's analyze the first 4 or 5 words, of this definition. Okay. So what the first 4 or 5 words are telling you, a computer is an electronic or digital machine. Now let's stop over here. A computer is an electronic or digital machine. Now what happens is, electronic machines are of 2 types. I repeat, electronic machines are of 2 types. The first analog and the second digital. The first analog and the second digital. Okay. Now, what is the difference between an analog and digital machine? So the difference is this. Analog machine is that machine which can work on any signal, any power between plus V and minus V. I repeat, the analog machine can work on any signal, any power between plus V and minus V. All right, the word any is important over here. Whereas a digital machine is that machine which can work on only 2 signals, only 2 powers, and that is either plus V or minus V. Now look at the dots over here. Be attentive to this. All right. So once again, I repeat this. What it says is that analog machine is that machine which can work on any signal, any power between plus V and minus V. Whereas the digital machine can work only on 2 signals, 2 powers, that is plus V and minus V. Now what happens is that a computer is a digital machine. A computer can understand, a computer can work only on 2 signals, only on 2 powers, only on 2 voltages, that is plus V, minus V. The computer cannot understand anything in between plus V and minus V. Now, if I am teaching you BEE, I repeat, if I am teaching you BEE, then I will call this as plus V and minus V. But because I am teaching you programming here onwards, I will not call this plus V and minus V. I will call this as 1 and I will call this as 0. Okay, 1 and 0. Okay. So now I will say a computer is a machine, a digital machine, which can understand only two things, that is 1 and 0. That's it. So the first and the most important thing which you should understand is that a computer can understand only 1 and 0, nothing else. It is a digital machine. Now let's read the remaining part of the definition and then a question will come to you. Okay. Now what this definition says, a computer is an electronic or digital machine which reads data, processes data and gives the desired output. In other words, a computer performs 3 tasks: input, processing, output. Now I have a question to one of you. So I have Prakash in front of me. All right. So Prakash, can you unmute yourself and can you tell me that this definition of the computer is similar to which definition? This definition of computer is similar to which definition? Can you tell me? Okay, so Prakash, I think he may not be in place or he's not responding. So I'll ask Dhruv. So Dhruv, can you unmute yourself and can you tell me?
Yes, program.
Yeah. Very good. So if you have been paying attention, you will realize that this definition of computer is similar. In fact, it is same as the definition of program. Now, this similarity is not a coincidence. I repeat, this similarity is not a coincidence. It is for a reason. And the reason is in point number 2 of the definition of the program. So I want you all to read point number 2, of the program in your mind. Come on, do that. Read point number 2 of the definition of program in your mind. Come on, do that. So the point number 2 says that, in other words, a program is a sequence of instructions to the computer. So over here, if you remember, I told you that whenever you write a program, the program is actually instructions to the computer. You are giving instructions to the computer. So what happens is, in a program, when you are writing, just a second, guys. So in a program, when you are writing that instruction number 1, read data, you are giving this instruction to the computer. When you are writing process data, you are giving this instruction to the computer. So basically what happens is, whatever instructions you are writing, the computer works accordingly. So when you are telling read data, the computer reads data. When you are telling process data, the computer will process this data. And that is why the definition of the program is same as the definition of the computer. Because whatever things the program is telling the computer to do, the computer is doing that. Finally, understand one thing, that whatever work you are doing on a computer, that work is divided into 3 tasks. And these 3 tasks are, just a minute, these 3 tasks are input, processing, and output. So whether it is sending a satellite into space, or whether it is controlling a nuclear reaction, or whether it is the work of adding 2 simple numbers, whatever work you are doing, okay, that work is divided into 3 tasks, that is input, processing, and output. Okay, so this was the answer of the first question, that what is a computer. Now let's come to the second and the third part, which says explain its various units and draw its block diagram. So now we are going to explain the various units of the computer, and simultaneously we will understand its block diagram. So the first unit of the computer is called input unit. Input unit is that unit using which we give input to the computer, using which the computer reads data. All right. So now, can you give me some examples? Can you give me some examples of the input unit? So I have Sonali Naik in front of me. Sonali, can you give me some examples of input unit?
Keyboard.
Yes, and few more.
Keyboard, mouse.
Very good. Okay, very good. So basically, examples of input unit are something like keyboard, something like mouse, something like microphone, and so on. So microphone gives voice input. Okay, keyboard will give text input, and so on. So basically keyboard, mouse, all of them are collectively called input unit. Now let's talk about the next unit, which is very, very, very important, and that is the memory unit of the computer. Please pay good attention. Things will appear to be simple, but not everything is simple over here. Now, the memory unit is used for storage of data. I repeat, the memory unit is used for the storage of data. So whatever data you store in your computer, whether it is song, video, audio, I mean, whatever, photographs, you store it in the memory unit of the computer. Now, above this line which you see over here, above this line, I am drawing the block diagram of the computer. And below this line, I will be drawing the block diagram of memory unit, which is very important, which will be used later on also. So this is the block diagram of memory unit. Now, how do you define a memory unit? Please be attentive. Things are not very simple. The memory unit is a sequence of locations where each location is called a byte. I repeat, the memory unit is a sequence of locations where each location is called a byte. Now, the question could be, what is a byte? So one byte basically contains 8 bits. One byte basically contains 8 bits. So the next question could be that what is a bit? So a bit is either a 1 or a 0. So I repeat everything once again. The memory unit contains a sequence of locations called bytes. One byte contains 8 bits and a bit is either a 1 or a 0. Okay. Now, things are interesting and difficult if you're listening. Now, over here, there's something very surprising. But before I tell you what is surprising, I'll tell you one more thing. Here onwards, many a times to explain you a concept, I will take example of a cell phone. Now, when I talk about a cell phone, then whatever I'll talk about a cell phone is applicable to a computer also, because don't forget, these days our cell phones are mini computers. In the cell phone, you have processor, you have memory, you have everything which a computer has. In fact, many a times much more than what a computer has. So for your better understanding, I'll take example of a cell phone. Okay. So now, which is the memory unit in your cell phone? So I hope when you buy the cell phone, you often talk about that my cell phone has 128 GB memory. My cell phone has 256 GB memory. So that 128 GB, 256 GB, that is nothing but the memory unit. Now, in your cell phone, now listen to this carefully. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. In your cell phone's memory unit, you have stored photographs, you have stored videos, you have stored songs, and many more things. But over here, I am telling you that a memory unit is a sequence of locations where each location is a byte. One byte contains 8 bits. And a bit is either a 1 or a 0. Now, having said all this, what is it which you are finding surprising over here? What is it which should surprise you over here? Now, this question is slightly difficult, so if you don't answer it, it's perfectly okay. All right. So I'll ask this question to Vedant. Okay. So Vedant, can you answer my question? Do you find anything surprising about this? Okay, let me ask this question to someone else. So, Vaishnavi, can you answer this question? Do you find something surprising over here? Anything surprising? Okay, come on. One last student, Yashvi Satam. Okay, can you tell me what is surprising over here? Okay. So I guess none of you want to answer this question. So now listen to me carefully. Now, if you pay attention to the definition of the memory unit, you will realize inside the memory unit, you have only ones and zeros. See, memory unit contains bytes. Byte contains bits. Bit is either 1, 0. So that means this entire memory unit simply contains 1 zeros, 1 zeros, 1 zeros. But in spite of that, you are able to store photographs, audio, video, and anything else into this memory unit. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make is that anything and everything which you are storing in your cell phone, in your computer, that thing is stored as a sequence of ones and zeros. That's it. So your beautiful photograph is actually ones and zeros in the memory unit. Okay, I hope you understand this concept. Okay, now how it is possible, that we'll see later on. Now let's come to the block diagram of the computer. So the next unit of the computer is called arithmetic and logic unit. Inside this unit, all the arithmetic and logical operations are carried out. So arithmetic operations are like addition, subtraction, multiplication. Logical operations are like and, or, not, and so on. Then apart from ALU, you have something called control unit. I always tell my students that pay attention to the name and derive the meaning from the name itself. So the control unit is that unit which controls all the operations in the computer. So all the operations in the computer are directed by this control unit. The control unit will give directions to ALU, or it will receive feedback from the ALU. And control unit and ALU together constitutes one unit called CPU. I repeat, control unit and ALU together constitutes one unit called CPU, the central processing unit. Now let's try to understand that how these units interact with each other. And for that, once again, take the example of adding two numbers. Take the example of adding two numbers. So let's say you want the computer to add two numbers for you. You want the computer to add two numbers for you, okay? So if you want the computer to add two numbers for you, on the keyboard, you will type the two numbers, okay? So you type the two numbers on the keyboard. Now look at the arrow which is going to come. So these two numbers are typed on the keyboard. So from the input unit, they are given to the CPU. Now inside CPU, central processing unit, there is ALU. The ALU will add the two numbers, and now the result is ready inside the CPU. Now what the CPU will do is, listen to me carefully. Oh, sorry, I forgot one more thing. Now the input unit can give the numbers directly to CPU, or the input unit will give the numbers to memory unit, and the memory unit will give it to CPU. The memory unit will give it to CPU. So there are two ways in which it can work. Input unit giving to memory unit giving to CPU, or the input unit directly giving it to the CPU. Now, as I told you, the CPU has the results ready. Now, again, two things can happen. The CPU will give the answer to memory unit. So the answer is 11, which is stored in the memory unit. Or the CPU can give the answer directly to the output unit. Okay. So the output unit could be monitor or printer or speaker. These are examples of output unit. These three dots means ellipses. Ellipses, it means etc. etc. They are called ellipses and it means etc. Now I'm going to draw some arrows over here, and you need to tell me whether these arrows are correct or incorrect. So these are the arrows which I will draw. All right. So now I will ask Vansh Chanchlani, can you tell me whether these arrows are correct or incorrect? It's okay if you give a...
Sir, from which one? From monitor to memory unit.
See, this arrow, and this arrow. They are correct or incorrect?
So down one is incorrect.
What about this one? Correct or incorrect?
This is correct, because if we type on keyboard, it will show on monitor, and monitor can give input to memory unit.
Okay, Vansh, very good. Actually, both the arrows over here are wrong. So let me remove these arrows first, and let me draw the correct arrows. So the correct arrows are these ones. Okay. Now what happens is the output unit will either take data from CPU, or it will take data from memory unit. Okay. The output unit cannot give data to somebody. All right. For example, at our home, inside our home, we have a TV connected to the DVR box of Tata Sky or Hathway or whatever. So the cable which goes from DVR, to the TV, that cable will give data to the TV. The TV cannot give data to DVR. So that is the concept over here. So anyway, now whatever you see above this yellow line, this golden line, this is the diagram of this is the block diagram of the computer, and this is the block diagram of the memory unit. Okay. Now what you will do is you will first have a look at these two diagrams. Okay, I'll give you 10 seconds to 15 seconds to look at this diagram. Then I will change the screen. And you need to draw these two diagrams in your notebook on your own. Okay, so take 10-15 seconds, look at these diagrams. Come on. Okay, now draw these two diagrams on your own. In your notebook, draw these two diagrams on your own. Come on, do that. Okay, draw the diagrams. All right, in case you need to look at the diagram, this is the diagram. All right, now at this juncture, we have understood question number 1, what is a computer? Okay, so is anyone having doubts over here? Any doubts? You can raise your hands if you have doubts. Any doubts? Okay, so that means either I teach very well or maybe you are very good students, you are very attentive, no doubts. So let's move on. Now, give a subheading over here, memory. Come on, give the subheading memory. Come on, do that. All right, now again, things are interesting and difficult. Be attentive. Now, what happens is when we talk about a computer has 3 types of memory. The first is ROM, which stands for read-only memory. The second is RAM, which stands for random access memory. And the third is the secondary memory. Now, we'll try to understand each of them in detail. Please be attentive. Now, the name itself tells you that this ROM is that memory where only reading is allowed, writing is not allowed. Now, when I say writing over here, writing means storing. Writing means storing. So that means on the ROM, you cannot store your own data, although you can read the data which is already written on the ROM. See, what happens is that a place where computer is manufactured, over there, data is written on the ROM for the first and the last time. And after that, you cannot write data on your own on the ROM, although you can read data from the ROM. And before I move ahead, I'll also tell you one thing, that all these things are very important for your Viva. Okay, many a times in your Viva, these simple basic questions are asked, so please be attentive. Okay. All right. Now, what happens is, because you cannot write your data on the ROM, because you cannot do modifications on the ROM, what happens is ROM is used for storing permanent data. Now, when I mean permanent data, what I mean, I will give you an example. So let's take example of monitor program. Let's take example of monitor program. Now, what is this monitor program? So listen to me carefully. See, what happens is, I hope you have heard the word booting the computer, B-O-O-T-I-N-G, booting the computer. So booting the computer simply means starting the computer. I repeat, booting the computer simply means starting the computer. So what happens is when you press the power button, of the computer, your computer starts. Now, the moment you press the power button of the computer, the monitor program of the ROM comes into action. And it is the monitor program which is responsible for starting things, and it is responsible to get your desktop in front of you. That means right from the time you switched on the power button till the time you saw the desktop, okay, the monitor program was working in the background. Okay, now if you understood what I told you, then you tell me one thing: is this monitor program of temporary nature or permanent nature? That means is this monitor program required for the entire life of the computer, or is it a temporary program? Come on, answer in your mind. I'm not asking any one of you. So the answer is it is of permanent nature. Okay, the monitor program is required throughout the life of the computer. Otherwise, your computer is not going to start. And such permanent programs are stored in the ROM. Okay. Now let's go to RAM. Now RAM is sometimes also called main memory. Now, once again, if you talk about your cell phones, I hope you remember that in your cell phone, you have that 128 GB of memory. That 128 GB of memory, it is basically the secondary memory, also called hard disk, about which we'll talk very soon. And I hope you also remember that in your cell phone, you have RAM, which is also called main memory, which is usually 4 GB, 8 GB, something like this. Now, RAM is the memory on which writing is allowed. That means you can store data on RAM. But a problem with RAM is that RAM is volatile in nature. Now, when I say RAM is volatile in nature, what does that mean? So, can you tell me what is the meaning of the word volatile in simple plain English? Okay, so I have Supriya in front of me. Supriya, can you tell me the meaning of volatile in simple plain English? Can you unmute yourself and can you tell me?
Which is not constant or permanent, sir.
Oh, very good. Correct. Okay. So one meaning of volatile is that something which evaporates very easily. Okay. So something which evaporates very easily is called volatile. Now, what is the meaning of volatile in programming or in computers? So here it means, listen to me carefully, that data which is stored in RAM, it is stored in RAM as long as the power is switched on. The moment you switch off the power, that data gets lost, it gets deleted. So many times we say, Mera data ud gaya. So that ud gaya is basically volatile. Okay. So RAM is volatile in nature. The moment you switch off the computer, the data will evaporate. Finally, secondary memory, I'll directly give example. So hard disk, pen drive, all these are examples of secondary memory. And now I have a question for you. In your cell phone, that 128 GB, 256 GB is the hard disk. Okay. So my question to you is, and I'm going to ask this question to one of you. That let me ask this question to Neil Sankhe. So my question to you is that this hard disk, okay, this secondary memory, is it volatile? What do you think? Is this volatile or non-volatile?
Sure, it is non-volatile because it stores, no?
Very good, very good. Okay. So as Neil told us over here, that his hard disk is basically not volatile. Why not volatile? Because see, you store anything in your cell phone, you switch off the cell phone, and still the next day that thing will be still there. Why? Because the hard disk, the secondary memory is not volatile. Okay. So these are the three major types of computer memory or cell phone memories. Now, once again, I want you to copy this in your notebook. And whenever I tell you to copy, my suggestion is don't take a screenshot. Okay. If we are, if the time is less, then I'll tell you to take a screenshot. But otherwise, write these things in the notebook. Okay. So come on, I give you 1 minute and copy this in your notebook. Come on, do that. All right. Does anyone have a doubt over here? You can raise your hand if you have a doubt. Any doubts? Any doubts? All right, let's move ahead, guys. Now, I want you to write a question in your notebook. So come on, I'll dictate the question and you should write it right. Differentiate between main memory and secondary memory. Differentiate between main memory and secondary memory. Come on, write the question. Differentiate between main memory and secondary memory. All right. So guys, there are three main differences between main memory and secondary memory, of which one difference is difficult and interesting. Be attentive. So first of all, main memory is nothing but RAM. And one example of secondary memory is hard disk. Even pen drive is secondary memory, by the way, the USB. All right. The first difference you already know, that main memory, that is RAM, is volatile and secondary memory is non-volatile. That you already know. The second difference, very important, very difficult. Please be attentive. It is very difficult. The second difference is that main memory has low access time and secondary memory has high access time. Now, what is the meaning of low access time and what is the meaning of high access time? So this I will explain you. And after I explain you, you can even write some notes in your own words. So please be attentive. Things are slightly difficult. Now, just 5 to 10 minutes back, you saw the block diagram of the computer. So in the block diagram of the computer, there was a memory unit. There was this memory unit, I'll write MU, and there was this CPU. And inside CPU, you had control unit and ALU, okay? Now, what will happen is the memory unit will either give data to CPU or the memory unit will receive results from CPU. The memory unit will give data to CPU or the memory unit will take results from the CPU. Now, let's talk about this arrow, the downward arrow. All right, be attentive, keep a track of this small point, the small dot. See, currently the small dot is under M, okay? So this arrow, the downward pointing arrow which you see, it shows the transfer of data from the memory unit to the CPU, okay? Now let's say you are transferring data, from RAM to CPU. That means let's say this memory unit is RAM, okay? So if you are transferring data from RAM to CPU, okay, then this data transfer time could be let's say 2 milliseconds. It could be 2 milliseconds. Now let's say you are transferring the same data. From hard disk to CPU. You are transferring the same data from hard disk to CPU. Now, if you are transferring the same data from hard disk to CPU, then the time taken to transfer the same amount of data from hard disk to CPU could be 5 milliseconds. That means in which case the time required is more. So it is hard disk, and in RAM it is lesser. So we say that the time required to access RAM is lower than the time required to access the hard disk. In other words, RAM is faster than hard disk. So this is a technical difference over here, okay? Now, finally, the third difference, the last difference is a commercial one, which says that RAM is more costly than hard disk. If you take the per GB cost of RAM, it is more costly than hard disk. Now, I want you to copy these differences, all right? And if possible, just write about this thing in your own words, about this 2 millisecond, 5 milliseconds. So I'll give you a minute for that. Come on, do that quickly, write fast. Do write some notes about it in your own words, about these things. All right. Now let's go to the last topic, the last question of the day. So if you were with me till here, okay, then just 15 more minutes, 10 more minutes, and then we'll be done for today's lecture. By the way, today I did not give you a break, but next lecture onwards, there will be a break of 15 minutes in between. Okay. So the lecture will be, let's say, from 6 to 7:15. Then we'll have a break of 15 minutes, and then once again from 7:30 onwards. Okay. Today I was going to leave you early anyway, so I did not give you the break. Okay. So now the next topic, very, very, very difficult. Okay. Sit till the end of it. Difficult and very important also. This is required for next lecture also. Now give the heading in your notebook 1.2 programming languages. 1.2 programming languages. All right, listen. Now in this topic, we are going to study 3 categories of programming languages, and the 3 categories are machine language, assembly language, high level language. But before I teach you machine language, assembly language, high level language, we need to understand a few things in general. We need to understand a few things in general. Now, what things in general? Once again, I'm telling you, things are very difficult, but very interesting. Be attentive. All these things are basic concepts of programming. So don't think it is a waste of time. Okay. Now, what are these general concepts? The first thing is, every language contains some symbols. So whether the language is Hindi, English, Marathi, whether the language is C, Java, Python, every language will contain some symbols. So if you talk about Hindi language, it will have symbols A, E, K, K, G. In English, we'll have symbols A, B, C, D, and so on. So that way, every language basically contains some symbols. So when I say symbols, I'm talking about the alphabets, P, R, O, G, and so on. The second thing which you should understand in general is that machine language, assembly language, high level language, they are categories of languages. They are not individual specific languages. So what I'm trying to teach you over here is, see, Java is a specific language. C is a specific language. But these 3 are categories of programming languages. They are not individual languages. Finally, the last thing which you need to understand in general over here is that every program basically contains some statements or instructions. Okay. So whenever you write a program, your program will basically contain some statements, some instructions for the computer. Okay. So I'll give you 10 seconds. Just go through these 3 points in your mind quickly. Come on. Okay, now just do one thing. Under this 1.2, you just write refer PN4. Refer printed notes 4. So this is there in detail in your printed notes 4, page number 4. Okay, so now the first category is machine language. Little difficult. Be very attentive. Please be attentive. Now, machine language was the first category of language which was used for computer programming way back in 1950s, 1960s. Okay. Now, machine language contains only 2 symbols, ones and zeros. Now, if you are attentive, you will find this very surprising. Why surprising? Because if you want to write a program in machine language, you are allowed to have only 2 symbols. That means if you write a program in machine language, the instructions will look something like this. For example, 100, 100, 11 could be an instruction to add 2 numbers. 110, 111, 001 could be an instruction to give the result, something like that. So the instructions in a machine language program looked like these, okay? Now I have a question for you. Okay, I'll ask this question to somebody. It's a very simple question. And the question is, writing a program in machine language was an easy task or difficult task? So I did ask this question to Jash Shah, I guess. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. So Jash, what do you think? Writing a program in machine language, was it easy or was it difficult? Okay, so yeah.
Hello, sir.
Pardon? Can you repeat?
Sir, it is difficult to understand.
Yeah, very good. So what happens is, writing a program in machine language was very tedious, very difficult. Why? Because you had only 2 symbols And any work which you want to do, you have to do this work using these two symbols. So you need to remember each and every combination of these ones and zeros, which was very difficult, very tedious. But machine language had one more disadvantage. Machine language had two disadvantages. The second disadvantage was that machine language was machine specific. I repeat, machine language was machine specific. Now this is very difficult. Okay, please understand this properly. Okay, I'll ask this question to one of you. Please be attentive. This is very difficult. Machine language is machine specific. Now let's talk about today, 2021. Let's say there are two computers. Okay, please be attentive. Things are difficult, but they are interesting if you're attentive. Now let's say there are two computers, computer A and computer B, computer A and computer B. All right. Now let's say computer A is a HP computer. No annotation speeds. Okay, just a minute, guys. Just a minute. So once again, let's say there are two computers, computer A and computer B. Now let's say computer A is HP computer, and computer B is the Dell computer. Or let's not say A and B, let's say HP and Dell. Okay. Now my first question to you is, although there are two different computers, HP and Dell, okay, every computer will do the same work. Every washing machine will do the work of washing. Every refrigerator will do the work of refrigeration. So that way every computer will do the same work, but still the internal architecture of HP and the internal architecture of Dell, the internal machinery of HP and the internal machinery of Dell will be exactly same or slightly different. So I'll ask this question to, I guess, Ulrich, if I'm pronouncing your name properly, Ulrich or Ulrich. So yeah, what's your name?
Ulrich.
Okay, so Ulrich, the internal machinery of these two computers will be same or slightly different?
Will differ from computer to computer.
Yes, very good. So the point over here is, if there are two computers, their internal machinery will be slightly different, Now we are talking about 2021. So let's say in 2021, you write a C program to add two numbers on HP machine. I repeat, you write a C program on HP machine and this C program is capable of adding the two numbers. Now let's say this program is working correctly on your computer. Let's say this program is working correctly on your HP computer. Now let's say you copy this program in a pen drive. You take this program to your friend copies it in its Dell computer. Now my question to you is that this program which works correctly on your HP computer, will it work correctly on your Dell computer? What is the answer? So I would like to ask this question to Jivika. Jivika Parab, what do you think? Will this work on the Dell computer?
What if it is machine specific? It won't, cause
No, I'm talking, take a wild guess. It's okay if you're wrong. I'm talking about 2021 about C programming language. What do you think? Will this program work?
C program, yes.
Yeah, very good. So the answer over here is yes, this program will work. Why it will work? Because C language, listen to me carefully, C language is not a machine specific. C language is not a machine specific. So machine specific means what? Machine specific means that a program will work on a specific machine. Okay. Now let me tell you what used to happen in 1950s and 1960s. In 1950s, 1960s, HP, okay, I don't know HP was there that time or not, but let's take it as an example. In 1950s and 1960s, every computer had its own machine language. Okay. So let's say there is a HP computer, and on the HP computer, let's say that you are writing the instruction 100100011. Don't forget that we are talking about machine language. Now let's say you are writing this instruction on HP computer in 1950 to add two numbers. This instruction, although it will work on HP, but it will not work on Dell. Why? Because the Dell computer will have its own language. Okay. So basically, the machine language in 1950, 1960 was machine specific. It worked only on one particular type of machine. That means this particular instruction will work only on HP machines, not Dell machines. So if you are understanding me, you will realize this is a clear-cut disadvantage. Okay. Now, so one thing which you must have understood, that machine language has two disadvantages, tedious and machine specific. But although machine language had two disadvantages, machine language had one advantage, and that one advantage was programs written in machine language were directly understood by computer. I repeat, programs written in machine language were directly understood by computer. Now, how come this is an advantage that we'll understand tomorrow? So tomorrow, I will ask some of you one question, and that question will be that what is the advantage of machine language? So the advantage is that programs written in machine language were directly understood by the computer. Its meaning, I will teach you tomorrow. For time being, you can just by heart it without understanding its meaning. Now, let's go to the next two categories. And now we just need 2 minutes to complete the lecture. So the next category is called assembly language, which was invented in 1965, 1970s, okay, after machine language. So in assembly language consists of mnemonics. This M over here is silent. This M over here is silent. So we say assembly language contains mnemonics, okay. Now what are mnemonics? So mnemonics are small, simple English-like words. For example, this is an instruction in assembly language, okay, and this ADD add in black color is a mnemonic. So looking at mnemonic, you will clearly understand that you are supposed to add 5 and 6. Now, one question, and you will answer this question in your mind. What do you think? Writing a program in assembly language, okay, was it tedious or simple? The answer, it was simple. Why? It was not tedious. Why? Because you had mnemonics like ADD, SUB for subtract, ADD for add, and so on. So it was not as tedious as machine language, okay? But surprisingly, assembly language was also machine specific. Now you may ask me how machine specific, because what happens is that the mnemonics were different for different computers. So if you're using an HP machine, the mnemonic for addition could be ADD, but on a Dell computer, it would be only AD add, that is, okay. So the mnemonics were different for different computers, and that is why doing programming using assembly language had this disadvantage. Now, finally, we go to the last and the third generation of languages, the third category of languages, which we have been using right from 1970s till today, the category I'm saying. And that category is the high-level language. So C, Java, Python, C++, they all are high-level languages. Now, in high-level languages, the statements are English-like or mathematics-like, like this. Now, this thing, X is equal to A plus B, this is an actual statement of the C programming language. Now, even if I don't explain you, you will easily understand that here we are going to add A and B and store the result in X. So one thing which you must have understood is that writing a program in high-level language like C is not tedious. Okay, that means the syntax, the rules are not tedious, and the high-level language is not even machine specific. So as I asked you the question that if you write a program in C language, can you give it to your friend? The answer is yes. Okay. So here we end the topic of 1.2 programming languages. Let me just quickly also tell you what we are going to study tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll start our lecture with some very important concepts like what is a compiler. Okay. So in your college lecture, you must have heard these words: compiler, compiling, compilation. Okay. So that is something which we'll study tomorrow. After that, we'll finally start with the C programming language tomorrow. So today we were studying the basics of the computer programming. Tomorrow we'll start with the C language, where I will teach you how to install the C language, and some beginning concepts of the C programming language. And then if you get time, we will also start with a very important topic called algorithm and flowchart. So as I told you, all lectures are important. So do not miss tomorrow's lecture. Okay. Now, if you want, you can leave this meeting, and those who have doubts, okay, you can ask me doubts right here. Okay. So if you want to